the new us.
How Jinx is forged, how powder turns into Jinx. First, I should mention that this entire piece contains spoilers for Season 1, so if you haven't watched the first season yet, I would recommend watching it first. Now, let's get to the main topic. We'll start with the short version of how powder transformed into Jinx, why she ultimately fired that final shot, and why Silco said, "We will show them all." These questions, along with the information in the enemy music video, all revolve around one central concept: standing alone against the world. For Jinx, her entire life has been a search for complete acceptance, regardless of functionality. If someone could truly catch her, she wouldn't have to be isolated from the world. However, due to various twists of fate, she ultimately returns to a state where she must stand alone against the world. Thus, Jinx in Arcane becomes the character we see now. That's the shorter version. The longer version is indeed much longer, but it can serve as a note. With Season 2 coming up, if you'd like to reminisce about what happened to Jinx in Season 1, this might help refresh your memory. So, let's begin. To understand Jinx's development, we must first understand her state of mind. To do this, there are several elements we should mention, one of which is non-mainstream alienation. This condition is actually shown in another Arcane character, Counselor Mel. Although Mel comes from Noxus, a society built on mindset of war and conquest, she seems to always seek a less violent path. This non-mainstream stance tends to continuously separate the individual from society, alienating them from others and the world. We can see how Mel grows increasingly distant and different from her homeland society, eventually being semi-exiled for being too sentimental. In Mel's case, she still had her noble status, and the difference was mainly in temperament. However, when this situation is applied to our powder, it becomes an even more intensified case. In the cruel world of Zaun's Undercity, beyond the clear enemies and oppression from the upper city, you'll find that its internal environment is also treacherous. People fight for every last bit of territory, scrambling for the crumbs left by those above. If you can't fight, survival becomes difficult. In this environment, young Powder, having lost her parents, had some support under Vander, but it felt more like living in a homeless children's shelter. It wasn't a complete sanctuary, it was semi-open, and you still had to face external pressures, whether from peers or various interactions with the streets. Regarding these pressures, if we look deeper, we'll find they're heavily related to functionality. In such a survival-of-the-fittest world, if you can provide function, you can secure your place in society and even in the shelter. Take Vi for example, she's excellent at fighting. You'll notice her talents and interests align with what mainstream society expects. Combined with Vi's strong social skills, she thrived in the Undercity, like a fish in water, essentially becoming the leader of the shelter's children, occasionally even helping Vander beyond her level. Powder, on the other hand, was exactly the opposite. Her talents and interests didn't align with what society primarily valued. For example, in fighting, even when she grew up and went back to fight the training dummy, her score still didn't surpass Vi's top record. Powder's main abilities, shooting, mechanics, and research, needed time and equipment to develop. But Powder was younger than most peers, not yet leveled up, with only Ekko being around her age. This put young Powder in a state of near-complete lack of functionality, and her social skills weren't great either. In the show, we rarely see Powder or Jinx having good relationships with anyone outside their inner circle. These characteristics that made it difficult to develop external relationships, combined with Powder's inherent insecurity and emotional fragility, created an individual who combined vulnerability in insecurity, non-mainstream functionality, poor social skills, and an additional cruel joke of fate, the inherent Jinx attribute of being naturally unlucky. You can see how terrible this is, as these elements reinforce each other, eventually entering a negative spiral. For such an individual, if they lived in Piltover, perhaps the powerful scientific community would have discovered their talent and abilities, nurturing them until they developed. For example, Professor Heimerdinger might easily give such gifted students decades of time, very patient in letting such talent develop. However, Powder was in the Undercity, a place with no margin for error, lacking patience, and extremely demanding of immediate functionality. In such a society, you must exchange functionality for space to resist oppression. If you can't provide functionality, you become an outsider, unrecognized by the world. Like in Mel's example, this non-mainstream status continuously separates the individual from society. Although functionality and social skills can somewhat compensate for this, young Powder had neither functionality nor the ability to expand her social connections. Eventually, she became an extremely isolated individual, almost entirely dependent on support from her inner circle. The problem is, this inner circle didn't fully catch her. Although Vander and Vi appeared to support her, from Powder's perspective, the whole world was still laughing at her, the tag-along, sister-dependent, unlucky one, and so on. More importantly, she still had to face the demands of functionality. You can see that everyone seemed to demand she become a more functional or a better version of herself. If she couldn't achieve this, it wasn't just about disappointing others. In a place like the Undercity, you would gradually lose your space to survive. So for Powder, there was no place in the world where she could truly be free from pressure. Only by achieving something on her own could she gain the space to resist oppression and malice. In this regard, you could say no one could help Powder. You might even notice that Vi also placed great importance on Powder's functionality and seemed to be seeking a better version of Powder. In other words, in terms of functional deficiency and resisting malice, Powder needed to face the whole world alone. It was a state of being isolated from the world, standing in opposition to it, having to fight the entire world alone. Because no one would really support you to the end, everything had to be exchanged for functionality. It was also a psychological state of being cut off from the world, alienated from it, where the world and others were all oppression and enemies. This condition of having to face the world's oppression alone, with only a small circle providing some additional support, is depicted in the show. One manifestation is what Powder fears most. You'll find that her greatest fear is being abandoned by their small circle. In the show, whenever she faces complete abandonment by their small circle, you'll see Powder fall into an extremely helpless state, only able to cry in panic, almost losing the ability to act. So, in simple terms, Powder is someone who lacks security but is also isolated by the world and must face it alone. This world against me mindset isn't just my arbitrary interpretation. In every episode's opening of Arcane Season 1, the production team prominently features the theme song, Enemy, by Imagine Dragons. Arcane is a meticulously planned series, so its music isn't randomly chosen but deliberately connects to the show's content, both in lyrics and MV scenes. In Enemy, besides the MV scenes containing supplementary footage not shown in the series, its lyrics directly depict Powder's mindset with "Everybody wants to be my enemy." This phrase constantly appears in each episode's opening, and in the latter part of the MV, the same lyrics, "Oh the misery, everybody wants to be my enemy," are lip-synced by Powder herself. Interestingly, when Powder says this line, you can see her melancholic expression, like a silent accusation about her own ill-fated nature. However, there's another line in the MV lip-synced by the grown-up Jinx, "Spare the sympathy." At this point, Jinx carries a kind of malevolent, bring-it-on attitude. This difference mainly relates to how Jinx and Powder respond to such situations, which we'll point out later. But broadly speaking, Enemy clearly demonstrates that both Powder and Jinx face a situation where the world is their enemy. Furthermore, Enemy has another set of lyrics, "Tell you you are the greatest. But once you turn, they hate us." Here, turn, in context suggests people laughing behind your back after you turn away. However, turn also has other meanings, such as transformation, so there's possible wordplay here. It suggests that if you change, if you become different, then we might not like you as much anymore. You'll find many relationships in reality are like this, seemingly good on the surface, but when one party changes or becomes not what the other party considers good, the relationship immediately changes. This somewhat demonstrates Powder's panic about the demand to be better in her functionally scarce situation, as well as Vi's reaction after the failed rescue explosion affecting Powder's psychology. In the third episode's rescue mission for Vander, Powder wasn't included in the rescue team and was left behind, immediately falling into panic and hysterical crying. Interestingly, you'll notice what saved her from this panic was discovering she can utilize the magical crystal's functionality. We can even see the sparkle in Powder's eyes at this point. This finding of functionality quickly reconnected her with society, and she returned to being the active Powder. However, as we later learned, although her monkey bomb worked, her Jinx-like nature caused the whole situation to develop in a worse direction. So when everything was heading toward its end, with Vi looking at the dying Vander, the still unaware Powder came out hugging her toy doll, eager to tell Vi, "Did you see me? My monkey bomb finally worked." However, things were no longer the same. Powder became the cause of disaster, and in her eyes, Vi abandoned her because of this. Just as, "Tell you you are the greatest," always speaks of what makes you special and strong, but once you turn, "They hate us," shows how quickly they blame you when things go wrong. Here we can also see that when Vi said she told her not to come, Powder's mind was fixated on, "Why did you leave me? Don't abandon me again." But Vi gave an angry answer, "Because you are a Jinx," before turning away. From this point, Vander, who would have given her a place no matter what, no longer existed. The small circle dispersed, and the only remaining support, Vi, left her because she messed up. In an instant, she was alone again. As mentioned before, this kind of solitude isn't like being lost on a street in modern city where you can simply call a cab to get home. This solitude is being isolated and left behind by the world, with only yourself left to fight against everything, that kind of helplessness. So Powder immediately falls back into a state of paralyzed panic and crying, only able to hysterically call for Vi to come back and find her. But Vi wouldn't return, someone else came instead. At this point, Silco emerges from the shadows, and after a few exchanges, you can see that Powder almost immediately jumps up seeking a hug from anyone who would speak kindly to her. This not only shows Powder's sense of helplessness but also touches one of the few remaining emotional parts in Silco's heart. The production team specifically arranged a scene showing Silco glancing at the fallen Vander. This glance not only shows brotherly melancholy but also reminds Silco of his own feeling of being abandoned, helping him understand that the child before him might be in a similar mental state, having to face the world alone. So instead of killing Powder, Silco provides her with a new place to belong. There's something quite noteworthy here. When Silco tries to comfort Powder, he says, "It's okay. We will show them. We will show them all." Who would comfort someone by following, "It's okay," with, "We will show them"? Upon deeper thought, you'll realize that only someone who sees themselves as against the world would say such things. Only those who stand in opposition to the whole world would need to show them all, and only those who are at odds with the world could truly speak and understand such words. In other words, when it comes to standing against the world, Silco and Jinx are extremely similar. They are both people who must face the world alone. For Silco, after being abandoned by Vander, there were no more genuine people in the world, only potential collaborators who could be traded for benefits and ideals. And the radical path he chose to walk was one that didn't seek understanding from others, but only sought to change the world, a way of no return. Silco is also, psychologically, someone who stands alone against the world. What's interesting though is that when two people who are both against the world stand together, it becomes two people facing the world together. That rootless lonely heart seems to suddenly find support, forming a group. Therefore, it's not, "You will show them" or "I will show them," nor is it targeted at specific others like, "We will show her," but, "We will show them all." Combined with episode 4, when Silco's right-hand woman Sevika naturally referred to "we," meaning either Silco and herself, or the entire organization, Silco didn't consider these people part of his narrow definition of "we." For Silco, apart from using "we" broadly to refer to all of Zaun, perhaps the narrowest "we" only refers to those who face the world with him, just him and Jinx. Although perhaps at the second stage, neither Silco nor Jinx fully understood this connection yet. As for Jinx, after transforming from powder at the end of episode 3, she spent a period struggling but also having some breathing room. On one hand, she was still growing up in the survival-of-the-fittest gangs of the Undercity, on the other hand, her power gradually increased. Besides improving physical combat abilities as she grew, her cooperation with Silco also gave her talents more corresponding resources. Not only could she assemble powerful guns and explosives, but Silco probably also allowed Jinx plenty of free time for research and development that might not yield immediate results. Meanwhile, Jinx also hid the vulnerable powder behind a facade of cynicism and madness. One thing worth noting is that Jinx's cynicism was initially a mask. Jinx was still struggling mentally, not as carefree as she appeared on the surface. After all, she had made mistakes before, almost killing everyone, and was then adopted by other forces. So Jinx's mental state was actually hanging by a thread. She used madness and cynicism to hide and support a mind constantly on the verge of collapse. Just as she had to imagine others weren't dead but had become imaginary spirits. This state continued from the end of episode 3 until Vi returned from the grave. The news that Vi was still alive, rather than just disappeared, appeared in episodes 4 to 6. In these episodes, Silco wanted Jinx to develop weapons that could harness the magical crystals for powerful effects. Jinx's genius shined through here. She mastered the application technology in a short time, likely weaponizing it by the end of episode 5. Not surprisingly, the next step would be mounting it on her rocket launcher. However, at this time, Silco's right-hand woman Sevika returned with news that Vi was still alive, triggering Silco's actions and Jinx's suspicions and investigation. Finally, Jinx set a trap and tied up Sevika for interrogation. Sevika proved to be no ordinary character, and while being interrogated, she counterfeited several pieces of information that could be used against Jinx, including, "she's with some girl enforcer. Guess she replaced you, it's only a matter of time before you implode," and Silco finally gets the message that you're about as good for our cause as you were for your family, etc. This information not only confirmed Vi was alive but also impacted Jinx's psychology later. However, for the current Jinx, Vi being alive mattered more than anything else. If we fast forward to episode 9, we'll find that in Jinx's mind, it was always Vi's voice supporting her to maintain that mind on the verge of collapse. Vi was like hope. A hope that if you just kept living, someday everything in the world would get better, just like someday she would reappear and find you, and they would live happily as before. Due to Vi's special significance in Jinx's heart, Jinx needed to investigate no matter what. So in episode 6, Jinx went to a prominent high platform, glanced at the magic crystal in her hand, then looked at the flare Vi gave her before leaving, the one that came with, "Wherever you are, light it up and I'll find you." Meanwhile, Vi and Caitlyn were in the middle of a life-and-death escape from Silco, and the upper city had issued orders to seal the cross-border bridge, refusing entry to anyone. In such a complex and chaotic situation, Jinx sighed lightly, then lit and raised the flare torch. At that moment, that blue flare in the dark night, as the camera pulled back to show its lonely color against the vast sky, accompanied by the rising vocals in the song, "Guns for Hire," seemed to shake a corner of this misty world. This scene, besides being impactful for viewers, also illustrated the main theme of Jinx's relationship with the world. The world was dark, hearts were chaotic, but when everything was falling apart, you had once promised me that you would find me if I lit this flare. Then I was going to request this promise, and no matter how vast the world was, this was all I needed. I only sought one person who could safely support me and wouldn't abandon me. So in the end, when the flare burned out and ravens arrived, as Jinx gripped the magic crystal again, thinking the world had abandoned her again, Vi appeared. And in that chaotic reunion, as long as someone could fully support her, Jinx became powder again. That tool for fighting against the world, the magic crystal, was no longer important and slipped from her hand. However, this scene didn't last long. Before the shared question from both Jinx and Powder, "I've become different, will you still unreservedly support me?" could be answered, Caitlyn arrived. That clear enemy identity as an enforcer, plus Sevika's warning proving true, instantly brought Jinx back to her armored mental state. "Hey, you found me. But it turns out my flare was just foolishly exposing my location. You came with our childhood enemy, an enforcer, searching for the magic crystal. In the end, no one in this world really cares about me, you only came for functionality. I'm still alone." These doubts continued to linger even after Vi was captured by the Firelights and Ekko. But more importantly was the disillusionment. We've mentioned that Jinx had been sustaining herself with an illusion after the incident, with Vi's voice being the most important part. If the real Vi hadn't appeared, Jinx might have continued supporting herself with this imaginary Vi's voice. However, the real Vi did appear, but different from expectations and bringing uncomfortable messages, that Vi might never have really cared about you. Just like this time, she didn't come for you but came with an enforcer searching for the magic crystal. This dismantled the foundation Jinx had long used to support herself. And Jinx discovering around the same time that Silco had hidden Vi's information from her. She then not only lost her imaginary refuge but also found in reality that Silco was also a liar who would betray her, at least that's what she thought at the time. The final catalyst came when Jinx watched from the high place on bridge as Caitlyn returned to the upper city, seeing the magic crystal being stolen, along with Vi turning back to find Caitlyn. This further confirmed Jinx's previous suspicions that Vi never really cared about her. What had supported her all along was just an illusion. In this situation, Jinx made one last effort, trying to eliminate the seducer, Caitlyn beside Vi to preserve her world of illusion. However, it was in vain. And in the subsequent conflict, she encountered Ekko, who might have been her only equal playmate from childhood. Ekko's situation isn't fully shown in the series, some of it is revealed in the Enemy music video. If you watch that Enemy MV, you'll find that Powder's only true peer playmate in childhood was Ekko. You could say Ekko was perhaps the person who saw the most real, unarmored version of Powder. He was also the person Powder least had to worry about functional demands when interacting in childhood. So Ekko was likely one of very few, or perhaps the only true equal friend Powder had in childhood. Just like in their childhood fantasy of swordsman and gunner games, they could play without any worries. However, when reality's clock started ticking again, that beautiful memory instantly became a life-or-death battle. And this time was different from before. When they were young, Ekko was still small and couldn't jump high. But this time, Ekko's physical abilities had evolved to the point where he could dodge bullets. The outcome then changed from Powder winning to Jinx losing. For Jinx, after Vi left with Caitlyn, she furthermore saw her only genuine childhood friend Ekko seemingly ready to kill her in this decisive moment. Although Ekko subsequently held back, Jinx had already fallen into despair. Vi abandoned me, the world abandoned me, indeed I am this world's Jinx. Even you, Ekko, my best childhood playmate, want to kill me like an enemy. Fine, let it be so. If I was just living in lies all along, then this world has nothing worth cherishing. But Ekko, if this world wants to end me, I only wish that the image of me in your eyes remains as Powder. This is why in the show, you'll notice Jinx and Ekko's interactions are different from others. Including their meeting, Jinx's demeanor during the swordsman and gunner game, and her expression after losing, as well as why Jinx was particularly lost after this encounter with Ekko. This is supplemented in the Enemy MV, because Ekko was one of Jinx's few true equal friends in childhood. Afterward, the despairing Jinx detonated a grenade to destroy herself. But we also know that although the whole world rejected her, there was still that other person, another who similarly faced the world alone, who would save her no matter what. And once a person survived death, they often emerge different. After crawling back from hell, Jinx determines to end it all. So she captured Silco while he was talking about deals at Vander's statue, and also captured Vi and Caitlyn. For Jinx at this point, she believed both Vi and Silco had betrayed her. She was completely isolated from this world. Everyone was her enemy. But before anything else, she still wanted to confirm Vi's true intentions. If there was such a possibility, perhaps she could really let go of everything, and Vi's suggestion of running away together did indeed tempt Jinx. However, Silco then brought up a crucial point. That Vi doesn't want you, Jinx. Who she wants is powder. Everyone betrays us. They will never understand. They won't understand the mindset of people like us who fight against the world. It's only us. They won't accept people like us. This was also the question that had always troubled Jinx. If I'm different now, will you still support me like before? Then in the subsequent arguments, and the process of Caitlyn taking the gun and being knocked down, we can see the pressure on Jinx from both Vi and Silco continuously increasing. One wanted Jinx to remember her past as powder, while the other wanted Jinx to embrace being Jinx in the present. But you can notice that when Vi kept telling Jinx to think about people from the past, every name mentioned became a demand in Jinx's inner world. They were all monster-like demands. These accumulating demands and their pressure finally drove Jinx into psychological chaos, and then, with the metallic sound of a gun, triggers violence in response to violence. The one hit by the bullet was Silco. Jinx hesitated for a moment, then returned from madness to an emotional state. I'm sorry. After all, he was the one who gave her space and shelter when she was most helpless. I'm so sorry. The father-daughter relationship between them was also genuine. But Silco didn't dwell on this. His time was running out, and there were things he needed to tell Jinx quickly. I never would have given you to them. You were never someone I would trade away. Not for anything. Not just for trading other things, but also a better version of you. So, don't cry. Don't cry anymore. You are perfect. I accept you as you are now. At this moment, Jinx finally understood that throughout her entire life, from childhood until now, including Vi, all the demands, a more functional, better version of herself, if she couldn't achieve it, she might be abandoned by the world, seen as the world's enemy, having to face the world's demands alone. It turns out there was someone who would support her even if it meant facing the entire world together. Silco had always been there. But that trickster of fate once again erased this possibility. In an instant, she was alone in this world again. However, this time was different. Silco's death finally completed Jinx's transformation. Like, hey, all I've been seeking since childhood was only this kind of peace. But this world just wants to mess with me, won't allow my existence. Constantly demanding a more functional, better version of me, and using fate to turn me into a harbinger of disaster, into Jinx. Well, if this world so desperately wants to be my enemy. Fine, bring it on. I will become this world's Jinx. This time I don't need any support anymore. I would face the whole world alone. And I'll show you what I am really capable of. We will show them all. You could say that in the final explosive climax, half of Jinx's actions were due to her promise to Silco, and the other half was a declaration to the world. Her anguished scream also represented that Powder had been there all along. Jinx never erased Powder. Even when she finally became Jinx, Powder was always there. Because if there was only Jinx, she would be like the Jinx in LOL before Arcane came out. That Jinx was cheerful. You'll notice that in some game trailers before Arcane, that Jinx was happy, with a kind of madness that was purely joyful. But in Arcane, we see pain. That pain doesn't come entirely from Jinx, but partly from Powder. Jinx didn't split into two personalities, she was always Jinx containing Powder. It's precisely because of this that Jinx experiences pain and panic. And the blue that tears through the sky at the end symbolizes not just the irreversible world situation, but as mentioned before, encompasses Jinx's entire emotional state. It represents someone who was turned into a disaster star by fate since childhood, abandoned by people, and ultimately must fight the whole world alone. Using her remaining humanity to scream in anguish at the moment of no return. That blue streak across the sky is also her life that can never go back. Jinx has been fully forged. As Arcane ends amid the melancholic tunes of What Could Have Been.